Amen. What a marvelous way to spend a Wednesday night. Take your Bibles with me, if you would, and turn to Proverbs chapter 19. Proverbs chapter 19, as I've said for a couple of weeks, we'll finish Proverbs 19 either this week or next week, right? All right, amen. So have some things that we want to look at, and as it's been definitely common here lately, fairly eclectic assortment of verses that we're looking at. As you get towards the end of the book, and we're over halfway through at this point, some of the thoughts expand out a little bit, and looking forward even to that. But for tonight, we are going to be, as far as the text goes, kind of jumping around, and just really the goal is to give you something to take home and think about, something that we can work on, something that we can improve in our Christian walk. And we started last week in verse number 17. And not to rehash, was it last week? I think it was last week. Yeah, last week. And not to rehash everything, but just to kind of get a running start of where we're at tonight. And we talked really just about having generosity and our attitude towards poor people. I think it's very easy, and if I could even say with a conservative mindset, to have a very political view of why people are poor and this and all that. And all that may be true, but just from a theological mindset, the Bible, almost without exception, lauds the attitude towards the poor of one of generosity and benevolence and being kind and understanding of where they're at. Throughout the Bible, it is a common occurrence, a common theme of do good to people who are less fortunate to you without a litmus test of how did they get there. We've all made bad decisions, and probably God has had mercy on many of us many times that we're not in a worse place than we are. And verse 17 of Proverbs 19 drives home the point. You're not doing it for them, you're doing it for the Lord. And one could argue that that's true of everything that we do, but he does drive the point home, especially there. We moved to verse number 18, and we talked about just really very briefly just an interaction with children and the importance of not letting them manipulate you and not letting them create a set of circumstances in your life to where you're not training them up, right? Parents, it really is the responsibility of parents to educate and to raise and to form small children. On Facebook every now and then I saw somebody put a post. It's not anybody I follow. The algorithm thought I would be interested in it, was wrong. It said some parents saying, I can't believe that schools aren't letting kids have phones anymore. And I think schools are really kind of cracking down on that. I'm like, hey, I probably agree with that generally, right? I don't think everybody lived for a long time without a cell phone in school. And not only that, if you homeschool, you can let your kids have a cell phone all day. Right? I'm not saying I approve of that. What I'm saying is take our ownership of our own children and the responsibility that we have. And kids are going to cry. Like if your kid never cries, you probably are, right? And so this is probably not a good balance that we need to strike here. Verse number 19, again, quickly. We talked about how if you bail people out, you'll probably have to keep bailing them out. Most people only learn when they suffer the consequences of their poor choices. And there's a fine line. Nobody's denying the fine line, but we're talking about a general rule. And people just get what they deserve. And most of the time, you shouldn't necessarily stand in the way of that. The best lessons are learned hard, right? And we should not prevent people from getting a good education, right? And be careful about that. Verse number 20, it really kind of drives in. This is it's something that comes up. I'm not going to say every chapter, but probably every chapter, just over and over again. Listen to what I'm telling you. Pay attention to what I'm exhorting you. The words that I have, the admonitions that I have, the instructions that I have, this is for your good. This is for your benefit. And, even as we read through Proverbs, if you do it monthly or when you go through it in a yearly Bible reading, however you do it, every time we get to a verse like number 20, it should cause us, I'm going to use this phrase, to kind of view it like a Selah in Psalms, right? And like, hey man, it's given us a list of 17 or 18 things. Be like this, don't be like this. Think about this, do this, don't act like that, do this, have your children like that. And then we get to verse number 20. Hear counsel, receive instruction. It should cause us to stop and think about, what has he been telling me? What is he about to tell me? It's not just a list of, hey, these are pretty good ideas. They are, but it ought to be something that we're stopping and thinking about, saying, how do these apply to me? That led us to verse number 21, perhaps a common verse in Proverbs as much as any. But it talks about how devices in a man's heart. I would simply reiterate, I want us to get this from verse 21. The devices are not necessarily a negative, right? It's just a plan that you have. It's just a thought that you have of something you'd like to accomplish. Not a negative here. But it does contrast that with the counsel of the Lord and how that's going to come to pass. And that ought really, these type of verses ought to give the Christian an incredible amount of hope, because no matter what's going on in our life, no matter what we're experiencing, no matter what we are going through, the counsel of the Lord is standing in my life. This ought to be a comfort to us. That does bring us to verse number 22, where we'll pick up tonight. Read verse number 22 with me as we think about on character. There are, verse number 22, the desire of a man is his kindness, and a poor man is better than a liar. I'd like to kind of divide this verse up. It gives, I would say, arguably kind of two independent thoughts. And think about it from this perspective, especially with the first part of it here. The desire of a man is his kindness. So let me lay out the point, the argument I'm going to give. And it's the thought, it is the thought that counts. We've heard that saying, right? Most of the time we say that when something has been an abject failure, right? When somebody's tried to do something, it didn't turn out well, somebody made an effort, and we come away with, well, it's the thought that counts. And while I don't think it should not be used to dismiss lack of effort, it should not be used to dismiss a lack of planning or poor effort, I do think that the Bible, and we'll look at least one other verse, I have a couple of cross references, but at least one other verse that the Bible said, what's in your heart actually does matter. And the thing is, it could just be, a miscommunication between people. It's like, what's your wife's favorite flower, right? Don't answer that. And it's like, you go to the store and you're like, what's your favorite flower? Flower to flower, right? They all look pretty. They all smell good. Can you really go wrong? And then you take it in there and you're like, and she's like, that's the one I'm allergic to. It's the thought that counts, right? Right? You understand what I'm saying? To where it's like you don't mean anything by it, and in your heart you stood in the store and you were looking at the flowers, and man, flowers are expensive too, right? You're looking at them and sacrificing and all of that. You're doing it, and you get it home, and she hates the white lilies, right? And probably if she's been probably how long you've been married may dictate the type of response, but hey, right? But what I'm saying is, in your heart, you had every intention of being a blessing to your wife and wanted her to know that you were thinking about it. And to the wife, that ought to matter a little bit, all right? That ought to get us something out of this effort we put to. So the desire of a man is his kindness. I really think it is wanting to do good with no ability to speak of in practice, right? It says the desire of a man is kindness, right? It's wanting to do good but can't. It's saying, man, if I could do more, I would do more. It's better than being able to do something and acting like you can't, for sure, right? He's like, what's your heart say? What does your heart want? It's like, you know what? Sometimes you don't have a lot of ability to help people. Have you ever been in a place where you genuinely in your heart were like, man, I wish I could help that person. I wish I could help them more. I wish I had more money. I wish I wouldn't have spent all my money, right? Whatever the case is, and in your heart, the desire is there. And what I'm telling you is that matters to God. And not if you're wasting money, don't mix those two up. But what I'm saying is your desire actually, it says it's a kindness to him. I think the application for this, let me give you the word of the desire. It means a longing, a craving, a desire, or that which is desirable. The word kindness here, it's stronger than just like a mere friendliness. It is describing a disposition that moves a man to treat others with mercy, generosity, and faithfulness. And it's really just this idea of, I want to do good for people. Our ability is often limited. It's like one of those things, sometimes people have bad days. Bad weeks, and things happen to them, and it's like you want to say something, but let's be honest, there are times when no matter what you say, it doesn't change anything, it doesn't make anything better. Maybe in times of loss, it just kind of is. And it's like, I want to do something, and if I don't say anything, they think I don't care. If I say something, it may be the wrong thing. But what I'm arguing tonight is your heart ought to want to do something, right? This is a positive aspect. And I would also argue that I think it is describing a place where it's not, if I would, I could. It's a matter of my heart wants to do it, and my inability to grieves me. And that makes a difference. It's not like, you know, you have $1,000 in your bank account and you act like you can't help somebody out with $100. That's not what be ye warmed and filled type level. This is not what is going on. And also I would, if I could counter on the other side, don't act generous when you're broke, right? Like, it's very easy to be generous when you don't have any money. Man, if I had $5, I'd give it to you. Well, that's probably not true. If you be careful about saying things that just are patently not true, make you worse than a broke man. Try to do something. The desire of a man's kindness. The desire of a man is his kindness. You don't have to turn over there for time's sake, but 2 Chronicles 6:8, I think, speaks to the concept. It says, "But the Lord said to David my father, forasmuch as it was in thine heart to build an house for my name, thou didst well that it was in thine heart." And God's just saying the fact that you wanted to means something to me, right? And there were other things going on, but David's heart had a desire to do something good. And listen, it's not a matter of, it's not really something you can be like, well, I need to have a heart that wants to do good today, right? Like, it ought to be something that we're just cultivating that comes naturally in our life. The last half of the verse, it doesn't take a lot of explanation, and almost kind of feels like Solomon there's a sense in which it's like, okay, so the desire of a man's kindness, I need something to kind of complete the syntactic pattern, and a poor man is better than a liar, right? It's like he just throws out, it's a true statement, it's an accurate statement, and really it kind of throws it on its head, kind of the social context that we can oftentimes put ourselves in, because it's this idea of being poor and looking down on poor people and looking down on, he said, there are worse things than being poor, and being bad is one of them, right? And it ought to make a difference to us. Look at verse 23. Verse 23 on fear, it says, "The fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall abide satisfied. He shall not be visited with evil." So there's a lot going on in this verse. The word tendeth. So it says the fear of the Lord tendeth to life. This word is stronger probably than you think it is, right? Let me give you the definition. It leads to, conducive to, or moves towards a definite end. I think most of the time when we use the word tendeth, it is a much weaker statement, right? Tendeth is more of an implication of yearning. When you look up what this word is talking about, it's a firmer word there. It says the fear of the Lord tendeth to life. For a second, let's back up and describe it from the opposite. So if the fear of the Lord tendeth to life, let me ask it like this. You don't answer it. I think it's rhetorical. What does not fearing the Lord tend to? Right? If this aspect tends this way, if I don't do that, can I expect the same outcome? Does that make sense? The answer to that is no, right? So and I think it's helped with Proverbs. I don't necessarily always do it, but I also say, if this is true, what the opposite would also be true, right? And so when we think about the fear of the Lord tendeth to life, it's saying there's a movement, there's an indication, there's an expectation of that. If I don't fear God, I can expect the opposite. I can assume that the opposite will happen. It says it tendeth to life. It says that he that hath it, the fear of the Lord, shall abide satisfied. This word abide means to lodge, remain, dwell, or pass the night. It's really, and I say shall abide satisfied. I want to focus on the word abide. We'll come back to the first part to tie some of this together. That it is more than, let me phrase it like this. So at work, I don't know how much people are practicing. It probably depends on what crew you are, but with how hot it is, they normally are doing something like 30 minutes of work and then they're a kind of a mandatory break, right? And so you can drive by places, and honestly, you drive around the plant, everybody's sitting around all the time. That's what it looks like, just kind of driving around. Okay, it's hot outside, right? Nobody's arguing that. And so these guys, it'll be like, I pulled up and gotten out of the job, and they're like, well, we were about to go take a break. I'm like, well, y'all do what y'all got to do, but I'm here. No, I'll stay and help, right? So you see all these guys, they get up, they go. Most of them, you should be wearing a tool belt if you're a carpenter. They'll take their tool belt off, and they'll go and sit. They call them a cool-down hooch, right? It's built a scaffold with a tarp over it. Most of them have fans or something, and they all go sit down. But you know what? They're not done for the day. Right? Now they may be done for the day, but they're still at work and they're still expected to get back up. That's not the same thing. But they're done, right? They're sitting down. They're not doing anything. That's not the same thing as at the end of the day when they put their tools in a box and they get in the van and ride to the gate and walk out of the gate. That's more of a permanent state. Now, I know they're coming back. It's an illustration, right? But what I'm saying is this idea of abiding, it's not like just kind of a passing through transitory stage. This is where I am at, right? So when it says, the fear of the Lord tendeth to life, he that tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall abide satisfied. This isn't like I'm satisfied some of the time. This is I'm satisfied all the time. I'm always in this state. This isn't a transitory kind of feeling that I have. If you fear the Lord, it tends to life. You have this and you're satisfied. Really what he's arguing here is if you fear God like you ought, you tend to be a pretty satisfied person, right? And so really the question ought to be, if you're not a satisfied person, it may not be so much of what you have. It may be so much of where your focus is at. It says he shall not be visited with evil. Well, there's a sense in which evil is a little bit subjective. I think that the word evil here is probably in the sense more of a bad day versus moral turpitude, right? You didn't know you were going to hear that word tonight, right? Right. It's more of a, it's been an evil day, not in that you did bad things, but that it was just a bad day. I think that's what's going on here more. And so when we think about how all of this ties together, the fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall abide satisfied. He shall not be visited with evil. Really what our thought process ought to be as we think about it, as we go through it, is like, where do I want my life to end up? Right? That ought to be a question we're asking ourselves pretty often. Where is my destination? And I think, is anybody where they thought they would be 20 years ago? Maybe to a greater or lesser extent, right? There could be, there's probably a wide range in this room if you'd have asked me 20 years ago, would you be sitting in Faith Baptist Church, where you're at, with who you're at, whatever the case, with not who you're at, all right? What I'm saying is, would you have said that? Well, probably most of us would be to a greater or lesser extent, kind of, maybe, sort of, not, right? We can understand that. So my question is it's not that stuff is guaranteed. Nothing's guaranteed in life. What I'm asking for is, what can I do to tend things in a certain way, right? Life is going to happen to us. God is going to have his will done. I can't necessarily predict all of that, but what can I do to make it tend towards life, right? What can I do to make the path of my life, even if I end up where I'm not, I still want it to be heading towards life. Listen, if you're, I don't mean to inflate your ego too much, but if you're in church on Wednesday night, that says something about who you are. It means something. You are in a very large minority, or very small minority. You're in a very small minority of not just people in the world, but evangelicals, Christians, and even a lot of Baptists, right? And what I'm saying is, these are the type of decisions that affect the course of our life. And really, it's this idea of, you need to decide on your destination. What do you want your life to come to? Where do I want to be in 10 years? Where do I want to be in 20 years? Someone's like, I'd just be happy to be anywhere in 20 years, right? I just hope I'm still, right? Whatever the case is, I hope that I have this, and I hope that this is going on in my life, and I hope that I've reached that pinnacle. What I'm arguing here is that the decisions that we're making today, and really, if I could boil it down to its most simple basic of what it's talking about here, what you think about God, how you interact with him, the fear that you have for God. This is all dictating the next part of your life. What destination are you trying to get to? And then pick a route that will get you there. Listen, a lot of times you can take different routes to get different places. At work, man, it feels like it kind of comes and goes. But right now, it takes forever to get out of Texas City. Like, man, it's an extra 10 or 15 minutes. You go through, sit in traffic lights for 4 or 5 cycles. I'm like, that's so bad, right? And it's just so frustrating. And I'm like, I'm going to go try to find a different way. And I'm like, so did everybody else today, apparently, right? And it's just like, it doesn't matter what you do. And I park off site, so I was pulling out of the gate today. And I saw, man, and it was still like 15 minutes before quit time. It was just a steady stream of people out of the gate. And I said, everybody's trying to beat this, right? And all them people trying to beat it or make it to where I get out on time and I can't beat it. And so I'm picking a different route. But you know what? All the routes I'm doing are trying to get me to one place, right? And the thing is, I could probably go out of the way far enough to where I wouldn't hit any traffic, but I'll never get home then either, right? And so really what I'm asking is, where are you trying to get to tonight? So I don't understand what you mean. Well, you're probably wandering pretty aimlessly in life if you can't answer that pretty succinctly. And really what it is, you're not fearing God like you ought if you don't even know where you're trying to get. If you're going to get where you're going, you have to know where you're going. And more than just it would be nice to get there, what's your actual destination? And the thing is that the reason this is important, it's because you don't get to pick. How would I put it? You don't get to pick hard conclusions. You get to pick direction. Does that make sense? I don't know where I'm going to be in 20 years. Lord willing, 20 years from today, I'll be here in church on Wednesday night. That's my expectation. That's what I unless something changes pretty drastically, I expect that to be the case. But I mean, the fact is there's a lot of variables over the next 20 years. And so what I'm saying is, what am I doing today that tends to life? What am I doing today that fears the Lord? You don't wake up where you should be in 10 years without decisions today that are going to make that difference in our life. It's built by, so let me ask you this here, when we think about the fear of the Lord, does that happen by accident? Now, I know that on its face of it, I know it's easy to say, well, of course it doesn't happen on accident. Well, then if that's the case, if we can agree, if we say, I want the fear of the Lord, and I ask the question, does the fear of the Lord happen on accident? You say no. Let me follow it up with this question. How then are you pursuing the fear of the Lord in your life? And if you don't have any sort of plan or process or anything in place, what you're actually hoping is that it does happen by accident, right? If the things I don't want to happen by accident, I planned for, or have somebody plan for me. Heather's like, we need to process some rabbits tomorrow night. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do it, right? And I said, we said every 2 weeks, and I did it last week. And she's like, well, it's on the calendar, we need to do it, right? And so I'm tending towards that direction tomorrow, right? That's likely what's going to happen, right? But the thing is there's a calendar that some rabbits got born, and we know that date, and you can count 12 or 13 weeks out, and we put that date on the calendar. That's how things get done in our life. But what we take that over to the spiritual side. I want to be closer to God. What are you going to do to make that happen? I want to fear God more. It's like, well, what does it look like to fear God more? It's like we say all of these Christian cliche things that sound really good and look really good on Instagram posts, but what does it actually mean? What does it mean to fear God? How does it look to fear God? And what am I doing to achieve this? And the reason we're doing this is there's a positive benefit to us. We're tending to life. Listen, all of us know that just because you love God doesn't mean bad things never happen. It's not even arguing that. It does say tendeth, right? It doesn't say there's no guarantees in life. But what it does say is you won't be visited with evil. Now, again, this is somewhat of a subjective aspect. But what I would argue, if you fear God like you ought, you really go through most of your life and with everything in its proper place, what other people may appear to be evil to them doesn't appear evil to you. Psalms 25 puts it like this. What man is he that feareth the Lord? Him shall he teach in the way that he shall choose. His soul shall dwell at ease, and his seed shall inherit the earth. That's really what our desire ought to be. So we want to stay out of trouble. We want to tend to life. I'm going to fear God. And I'm not just going to say, yeah, I fear God. I'm going to fear God. I want to know what that looks like in my life. And if I'm not doing it like I ought, I'm going to set forth a plan to get me closer to where I need to go. That brings us to verse number 24 on industry. Read it with me. A slothful man hideth his hand in his bosom, and will not so much as bring it to his mouth. Again, a slothful man hideth his hand in his bosom, and will not so much as bring it to his mouth. Again, slothful, it probably means exactly what you think it does. It's lazy, sluggish, idle. habitually unwilling to exert himself. The word bosom here, it actually, if you look up the word, it kind of has this idea of a dish or a bowl or a platter. That's one of the idioms of it. So it's not like, I don't know that it's so much there. It's just your hands close to you, and it kind of carrying the idea of it's like you're so lazy you put your hand in a bowl to bring food to your mouth and you won't even get it. Like it's a hyperbolic extreme example of laziness, right? And he's saying this is what a slothful man does, and I think that this idea of the dish or the bowl, it fits well with the second part of verse. Will not so much as bring it to his mouth, again, this act of eating. And so again, there's what's the term? Not a hyperbolic, yes, but an extreme illustration being put here. And let me put it to you like this: people would rather starve to death than take their hands out of their pockets, right? And again, it's stating an extreme for effect. But the problem is most people don't wake up there. They find themselves there. And it's by little decisions here. It's using, this is the term, deliberate exaggeration. I'm glad I put that in my notes when I was trying to think of a way to put this. Deliberate exaggeration, so committed to ease that he won't even finish the simplest task necessary for his own benefit. And this is a good this is a good way to know if you're being lazy. And it's when you quit doing things that are even good for you. Right? You're so lazy, you won't even benefit yourself, right? You won't even take steps to improve your own position in life. This is the height of laziness is not slacking off at work, which is bad enough as it is. The height of laziness is you won't even look for a job, right? Like you're intentionally hurting yourself now, and you're too lazy to do anything about it. Can't even be bothered for profitable things. It's really describing the insanity of laziness. It's crazy to be lazy. It's because it has direct negative impact, not really on the rest of us, if we just state it generally. It has direct negative impact on you. When you are lazy, you suffer from this. When you aren't motivated, you're the one that pays the price for it. And even if you're muddling through life, laziness is the type of thing that just is always dragging you down. And you realize you get to decide if you're lazy or hardworking. You 100% get all, you know how many things in life you have little control over? Most things, right? And kids say it all the time, when I grow up, I'm going to do whatever I want. It's just like, okay, whatever, right? Yeah, that's a funny one, right? And even as adults, we understand so much of our life is dictated, but you know what? You get to control how hard you work. You get to control how much effort you put into every last single thing that you're like, well, I don't like it. Well, work hard and get it over with, right? Like, I mean, all of this is up to you. This idea of laziness in industry and what he's talking about here. If you won't take your hand out of your bosom, that's your fault. Nobody's sitting over there sitting on you, holding your hand in your bosom. You are choosing not to do this. Really what it comes down to is you're going to have to decide to be self-motivated in life. If a boss cannot motivate a lazy person. I've seen too many try to do it, right? It's just, a boss will never motivate a lazy person. They may get some production out of them when they're being watched, but a boss can't motivate a lazy person. Listen, unless you were born into an insanely rich family with connections all over the world, which I don't, if any of y'all been holding out on your tithe for starters, right? But assuming the fact that is not what's going on, that's not where we find ourselves. Really what this comes down to, unless you've been born into an insanely rich family with connections all over the world, you're going to have to take your hand out of your bosom, to use this verse, put it in the bowl and bring it back to your own mouth. I'd recommend you learn to do that at a high rate of speed. Right. This is going to be the way that most of us are going to be successful in our life. Listen, you can complain about the economy. You can decry the economy, the rules, the culture, the game, the corruption. And probably, you know what? All of that is maybe rigged against you. I'm not, well, fine. But you know what? The quicker you take your hand out of your bosom, put it in the bowl and get it to your mouth at a high rate of speed over and over and over again as fast as you can, the better off you're going to be. The only people that complain about the rigged game is people that aren't playing very hard, right? Like, the harder you play anything, the better off you're going to be. You should just be trying hard. You should be putting forth effort in every aspect of your life. The Bible taught, this is heavy in Proverbs, but not isolated to Proverbs. I don't know if anybody saw it. There's some guy out there who's like promising like $10 million if a WNBA team will play a state championship boys high school team, right? And you know what? I was just thinking about, I kind of put myself in that place. You know what? If I was on a high school basketball team, won a state championship, and I was playing the WNBA, I will try harder than I've ever tried in my entire life to win. I'm sure the women would take that option too. But I'm just saying, you should try like you're on a high school boys basketball team playing a WNBA team for $10 million every day when you get up. Every day when you get up, your attitude should not be, well, I'm going to mail it in today. How many days are we going to mail it in? How many days are we going to sit around with our hands in our pockets? Just hoping that things get better, hoping that the job gets better, that life gets better, that more things come to me. It doesn't work like that for us serfs, right? Like, listen, we're going to have to, at a high rate of speed, take our hand out of our bosom and go after things. Oh, that's an interesting. Yeah, I put it when I was studying. I'll go ahead and say it now. If 90% of your free time is spent with a screen in your face, you're facing an uphill battle in life. Let me say it again. If 90% of your free time is spent with a screen in your face, you're facing an uphill battle. You're really not even fighting. A lot of issues temporally in life can be solved by working harder. Not all of them, but enough of them to where it's worth working harder, right? This is a positive thing. The Bible talks about this. Proverbs 21 says, the desire of a slothful man killeth him, for his hands refuse to labor. Proverbs 6, we already looked at this one. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of sleep? Yet a little sleep and a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man. Listen, I'm bearing down on this point. If you're not happy with how much you have in life, you shouldn't be asleep at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. What are you doing in your own personal life to do anything about what you're doing? Listen, it's too easy to get into I'll just go full Napoleon, right? Was it his shirt or his jacket? Just go full Napoleon and say, it's just hard out there. Yeah, it's been hard and it's going to be hard. And so you better be hard, right? Like you better get up and be pursuing with every bit of your being. Listen, this is, I don't feel like let me put it like this. I am probably expanding beyond this verse, but I don't think I'm expanding beyond the pages of Scripture when I'm saying what you do in your life matters. How hard you work matters. Verse number 25 on punishment. Smite a scorner, and the simple will beware. And reprove one that hath understanding, and he will understand knowledge. Smite a scorner, and the simple will beware. I looked up the word smite. I had a pretty good idea what it meant, but it means exactly what we thought it meant: to strike, to beat, to wound, to punish. I think it's important to understand this idea of a scorner. This is more than just a fool. It's a fool on steroids, right? It's a very intentional, aggressive fool. And it contrasted with this simple. The simple people are uninformed but still teachable, right? A scorner and simple may both not know, but a simple is willing to learn. The scorner has decided he's too good to learn, right? So that matters your attitude. He doesn't just simply, and not only that, the scorner is a step beyond that, because he's not just simply rejecting wisdom, but he's making fun of it in the process, right? So it's like multiple levels down. It's not that you just don't know. It's not that you just don't know and not interested in it. It's that you don't know, you're not interested, and you're making fun of it, right? This is a pretty low. And it says, smite a scorner, and the simple will beware. So it really comes down to this. You can either learn the lesson or be the lesson. Right? And what he's saying here is you're much better off to learn the lesson watching somebody else get boxed about the ears, right? Man, and you can do this at work. You can do it at home growing up. You can do it in your job. You can, to a certain extent, you can do it in a church, right? Okay, well, if they got in trouble for that, maybe I'm not. Right? Anytime you see somebody getting in trouble, it ought to be teaching you a lesson. And whether or not it's super public or put out there, what I'm saying is, hey, there's negative consequences to when you do that. I'm not going to do that. At work, they have what's called life critical rules, right? And so I think there's 7 of them. I don't know that I could name all of them. Some of them don't really feel life critical, but that's the umbrella. It's just even stuff like permits. But one of them that I'm very cognizant of is, as contractors, we have to be 100% tied off all the time when you're on any scaffold, right? If you step off the ground onto a scaffold, contractors have to be tied off 100%. So you have 2 lanyards, right? To where one of them always has to be hooked up for something. If you get caught not doing that, you have a very good chance of getting fired instantly. And I'm not even talking if you're safe. I'm saying if anybody catches you doing that and makes an issue out of it, you are probably going to get fired, get removed from the plant, and it'll be a long time before you're allowed back in. And I've seen people get fired for that. Turner's fired people for it. I've heard other companies getting fired for it. And so I know they're serious about that. Right? If I just, for whatever reason, just could not tie off and I got in trouble for it, I'm not going to be being marched to the gate and being like, I didn't know y'all cared that much. Like, I am fully aware of this. And it's because I've seen people, and I'm using an illustration. I'm not even necessarily putting them in the category of a scorner, but there's an element in a temporal world I'm not the only person that knows, like, this is not a secret out there. It's like, Caleb, don't tell anybody that if we catch him without a harness, right? This is shouted from the rooftops, right? And so if you're not tied off, it's not because you didn't know. It's because, like, when you hired in, they probably took you to a tool room, gave you a harness with a lanyard with 2 things on it. What do you think they wanted you to do with that, right? Just common sense would say they probably want these hooked off when I'm off the ground, right? But we ought to learn the lesson from things like that. It's not that we know everything, but I'm always looking to learn more. So here's really what it comes down to. Bad people get punished. Smart people take note. Amen. Smart people get talked to. Smart people listen. You can either get the smiting or watch the smiting. And listen, for in all the different levels, smiting goes on around you quite a bit, right? We could talk about speeding, and you know what? How to never get a speeding ticket? It's not that complicated. Don't speed, right? It's like, I don't understand why the cop is picking on me because you were doing 55 and a 50. Now you say, well, that wasn't that much. Said every squirter that ever got a traffic ticket, right? All I'm saying is there's a lot of, like, we know, listen, when you know where there's penalties assigned and you do it anywhere, what do you think that makes you, right? Like, how do you describe that temperament? And listen, whether or not you speed, and if you don't want to tie off at work, honestly, you're going to be the only one that gets hurt. Right? Nobody else falls because you weren't tied off, right? It's not like, oh, somewhere else in the world somebody falls every time you don't fly. No, it's all on. But what I'm saying is there's penalties associated with this. It talks about the simple will beware. It means to become prudent, cautious, sensible, or shrewd. Every time you see somebody learn a lesson, this is what it should make you. It's the whole idea of never be the cause of the safety meeting, right? Like at work, and they do that often, and I think every time I've ever seen it, it's been done respectfully. Somebody has a little incident, there's a good chance, at least where we're at now, they're gonna be able to get up and tell people, hey, they've had people break their hands, and they got up and said, this is what I was doing when I broke my hand, and please don't do that. It's really bad, right? And so really what they're saying is, look, my hand's in a cast, I'm laid up, I've had to have surgery for this. And this is what I did. I put my hand here. I stuck my hand in this place, and this rolled, or this slipped, or this what. And every time I hear a story like that, you heard the story today, right, about the guy that he fell off of wasn't at work, but he fell off the second setup of a ladder, and it killed him, right? And when I heard that, and there were some other medical issues going on, but I don't really care, right? Like when he told that story, the guy that was telling the story, I'm like, I'm already pretty careful about ladders. I respect that, but I don't respect the second step that much, if I'm being completely honest, right? But my level of respect for the second step of a ladder went up today because I heard how somebody died as a result of it. And listen, it's I'm using work illustrations, speeding illustrations, and in a sense, none of it mattered. I mean, the guy did die, but you understand what I'm saying. This is all, but I'm talking about in things that matter in our life. Listen, you ought to be paying attention to the way God deals with people. Amen. People don't come to church and have issues. Say, well, how do you know that's connected? I just always assume it is, right? For my own personal benefit. Listen, if you're years ago, probably 25 years ago at this point, we had a family that were relatively newly saved, and they started coming to church. They were not very faithful on Sunday night. They were visiting family a lot. And it's because it's what they did on Sundays, right? Well, they ended up having a pretty serious car accident on a Sunday night when we were all at church. And I don't think they missed a church service for quite some time after that, right? And, you say, well, yeah, you don't know if that's connected. I don't know if it's connected. All I know is if I don't come to church, I sure ain't driving around, right? Because why would you do this type of thing and allow God an opportunity to do this to you? So bad people get punished, smart people take note. The word simple here is naive, unexperienced, gullible, easily persuaded. Listen, you ought to be pretty easily persuaded when you see people being done. Listen, it really is a matter of this. You ought to be watching people. You ought to be watching people, seeing how things turn out, being aware of how things go for people. Beware of dog signs. I have some more illustrations, but I've kind of hit a couple of them, so I'll let them go. Man, don't have to learn everything yourself. That's what the Bible's saying. The simple watch and are punished. Proverbs 9:8, before we move to verse number 26. Reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be yet wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. I think it's very obvious what side of that line you should be on. Verse number 26, we see on family. It says, he that wasteth his father and chaseth away his mother is a son that causeth shame and bringeth reproach. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I could spend a lot of time on this, but don't intend to. But so this is definitely a verse that when I've read it often and was not sure what it meant. Wasteth his father, chaseth away his mother. So this is one place where looking up some words actually helped, because at least for myself, it gave clarity to what's being talked about. The word wasteth here means to ruin, to devastate, to despoil, or to consume. And I was aware of the fact that, armies go through and lay waste to something. So that context did not surprise me, but I had never gotten to that context in this verse, if that makes sense, right? So when I read that, I am familiar with the word wasting, meaning those type of things, right? So he that ruins, devastates, despoils, or consumes his father, chaseth away his mother. I know what chase means, to drive away, force to flee, cause to leave. I'm like, but I don't. So again, work with me through the thought process. It's like, so how are these fitting together? What is this saying? So let me give you what I believe the application to be here. And because people do this to their mother and father sometimes. It is stealing from your elderly parents, maybe even younger parents, but it's when taking advantage of them and basically spoiling them when they can't do anything about it. And the idea of chasing away his mother, most commentaries that I looked up, they all kind of agreed. It's basically treating your parents so poorly that your mother is driven from her house, right? You're chasing her from where she is because you're spoiling them, wasting them, and chasing them away. And really I think it's important to think about here as we think about this idea of wasting is you should always respect your parents. This is an important thing. This is an oft-repeated phrase and concept in the book of Proverbs here. And so I think that when we think about this idea of wasting, and children, I'm sure do this at times, it's especially when parents get elderly, I think there's a greater possibility for this, because there's a sense in which roles get reversed the older somebody gets, and a lot of people, elderly people, don't maintain all of their faculties, and kids have a responsibility to not take advantage of their parents in times like that. I have no doubt, I don't know personally of any examples of people that have driven their mother from her home, chased her mother away, and laid waste to their parents, and their parents go to the bank and they're like, they don't have no money in there. Like, well, where's all the money? Well, so-and-so pulled it all out. Well, who's so-and-so? Well, that's my son. And they were probably on the account, they had trusted him, and they're wasting their parents away. And I'm not even talking about legal aspects. I'm not talking about, well, the bank should have stopped that. You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't take advantage of your parents. You shouldn't spoil your parents. You shouldn't lay waste to your parents. You shouldn't chase your mother away from where she's at. I mean, if you could perhaps interpret it other ways. I don't think anybody does, but man, don't do things that make your mother want to run away from you if you wanted to get super practical in life, right? We're just not going to do that. It's really, let me give you a couple of things to think about. All actions that you take on behalf of your parents should be done with their interest in mind and not your inheritance, right? It matters the way that you treat your elderly parents. And I'm using the term elderly here, not because it's implied or implicit in the verse, but I think that that's when it's more likely to happen. Like I could probably try to steal money from my dad if I'm like, just follow my train of thought. I'd have a hard time right now. He's still pretty sharp, right? But let's be honest, in 25, 30, 40 years, well, probably not 40, right? But, 25 or 30 years, kids get a lot of control in their parents' life oftentimes. And I foresee there being a certain circumstance where I have a lot of access to my parents' stuff. And I have a responsibility, what the term would be, a fiduciary responsibility. Forget fiduciary. You have a theological responsibility to not take advantage of your parents when they are really dependent upon you to take care of them in their age. It gets to the point it talks about. It says it's causing shame and bringing a reproach, and not upon the parents. I think it does it to you. And the fact is that ought to matter to you, that you're bringing a shame and reproach. Let me say, I don't know that I think that verse says that. Okay, well, let me give you other verses that allude to it that I think build upon this argument. Proverbs 28:24 is the strongest of that. Whoso robbeth his father or his mother and saith, it is no transgression, the same as a companion of a destroyer. I mean, think about the kids that would do that. I have no doubt there's a level of it's not that big of a deal. It's my mom, it's my dad, and I'm doing this. And they rationalize away. The Bible says you're a companion of a destroyer. Proverbs 20:20 says, whoso curseth his father or his mother, his lamp shall be put out in obscure darkness. And so it does matter how we treat our parents. Magda puts it like this. I turned my page and saw one more cross-reference. For the son dishonoreth the father, the daughter riseth up against her mother, the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own house. And really, you could go over and read the context, and really it's saying when things get bad, even immediate family members start acting horribly, and there's an expectation of loyalty in families, right? And so you ought to behave right there. Verse number 27, man, I think I have quite a bit on verse 27, surprise, right? So I don't know that I just want to blow through it for sake of just saying we covered it. And I've probably got 2 or 3 more weeks here in Proverbs chapter 19 at the way we're going. So I appreciate your attention. You can